You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where we will be reviewing the action from the fourth T20 between India and England. A match which seesawed back and forth before Shardul Thakur, of all people, finally managed to wrestle it into India's hands. I'm Jack Hope, and to go over it all, I'm joined, as ever, by Ross Legg. How are you doing, Ross?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you, mate. I'm finally glad that someone has... We can stop talking about the toss, because that frustrates me more than anything else, so I'm glad for that.
Good. And Daniel Norcross, good to have you back, Daniel. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I think I'm just slightly grumpy because every time I thought, should I go and get my gin and tonic now? Then something would happen, but then I would have had the opportunity to do it because they would spend 6 minutes checking to see if a catch that was clearly been grounded had been grounded, and then say it hadn't been grounded. So I'm fine. Thank you very much. I think lockdown's getting to me. I'm sorry.
It did kind of have an NFL pace to it, this game, didn't it? Ross, before we get into the show, can you quickly remind our listeners what to do?
Yep, they should like and subscribe if they're watching us on YouTube, or follow us at The Cricket Pod on Instagram and Twitter, as well as whatever podcast platform you're following us on.
That's perfect. And can you move on and recap the game in 30 seconds or so?
Yes, so in the T20 test match that was India versus England today, held over a vigil of about 15 hours, India posted a 185 thanks to the brilliance of a debut batting performance. He didn't bat in the last game from Sky, which finally proves that he should be in this side, supported ably by the likes of Pant. England threatened to chase it down with a great innings from Ben Stokes and a very ugly innings from Jason Roy, it's fair to say, but they all count, and with a bit of hitting at the end by Jofra before it was wrestled back, as Jack said, by Thakur, and England succumbed to a devastating loss to the rampant India to level the series at 2-2.
Ross, yeah, so as you said, this is the first time in the series that we really saw the team batting first go for it and actually post a target that looked really defendable. And in large part, that was down to Suryakumar Yadav. You're pretty much his number one fan, I think. Did you enjoy how he batted today?
Well, I think we've waxed lyrical about him throughout our coverage of the IPL last year, and we've been calling for his inclusion in the T20 side. When India first brought him in, he batted at 6 under Shreyas Iyer, and that's kind of not kind of where you should utilise him. And I think the first time for him batting in India colours, much like Ishan Kishan, he did not disappoint. I mean, first ball went for 6. He launched Rashid for 6 as well. And the confidence just in his innings and just the approach of I was about to say careless, but more like a carefree approach, just unleashed the shackles and took the India team that is always wanting to hit 150, 160 runs to hit 180 runs, which was the difference between the two teams.
Yeah, a pretty good debut batting performance, Daniel, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely fantastic. I love that first shot. I mean, that was 1970s Caribbean style, hoiking, whacking, pulling, calling it what you want. It one leg off the ground. We've seen him do it in the IPL, so it's no great surprise. I do think everyone's got Shreyas Iyer wrong, though. I mean, this idea that he's an anchor, he was going at about 200. He's absolutely brilliant. But had it not been for those two today, India would have lost that game because yet again their top order failed to fire. Kohli's hit a couple of 70s, but it's kind of masked the fact that when they bat first, I don't think Kohli's quite right where he bats. I don't think he should be down the order. I have a theory he should open when India bat first because, well, I mean, it's because he can manipulate the strike early on, gives them a bit of solidity. They don't lose 3 wickets in the power play, and then they can go absolutely berserk thereafter. But they lost those 3 wickets, and had it not been for Suryakumar Yadav, they'd have been in all sorts of bother. I don't think England bowled up as well as they have done in previous matches, and certainly in the first and the third match. But they're taking nothing away from the young Indian batters. But I've got to say, actually, that for me, it's more important what Hardik Pandya did with the ball than what Suryakumar Yadav did with the bat, because we sort of know that India is blessed with a whole load of extremely powerful hitters. What we didn't know was if it was sustainable to have a 5-person attack. And once you find out that Hardik Pandya can actually bowl 4 overs with varying his pace and be really difficult to get away, that actually starts to give them something that looks like a plan, doesn't it? Then they can actually start to structure. Because the problem India have had in their T20 side is an embarrassment of riches, loads of people to choose from, but never really quite working out what their method is. Now, once you've nailed what your bowling method is, the personnel can change. Bumrah can come in for Thakur, if you like, come in for Bhuvi, but he's unlikely to. Your spinners can have a different identity, but at least then you know what it is that you're trying to do, and then India starts to look like a really fearsome proposition.
I think that's a really good summary. The one thing I'd probably disagree with slightly is the idea that India have historically been a team that displayed that hitting potential. What I was really impressed by today was how consistently the whole Indian lineup batted with intent, from Rohit Sharma literally hitting the first ball of the innings for 6 to Sky doing exactly the same thing, and even Shreyas Iyer, who kind of broke out of the stereotype of the player that he is today with that innings. He hit his first ball for 4 as well, and when you see a team bat first, one of, I guess we'll talk briefly about the toss situation. In T20 cricket, quite often the team that bat first end up losing, and the reason for that is that they don't really know what par, as we refer to it, actually is. So they often end up coming in below what the actual par score for that pitch would be. I think, as someone watching the game, a good way to know whether the team batting first has reached par is to look at sort of when their wickets fall in the innings. And if you look at where the Indian wickets fell, I mean, they ended up down to their number 10 batter right at the end, but they were able to keep their momentum up because the way the wickets sort of fell. And that's quite a long-winded way of getting to the point. But when you see a team, which India can do sometimes, when you see a team end up 5 wickets down in their last over, they probably got the pace of that innings wrong. And I think it's just like India the whole way through, the intent was right. They took the right amount of risk. I mean, there weren't those sparkling individual performances that we're maybe kind of used to with this side. But from a team perspective, loads of positives. If I was an India fan, I'd have loved seeing what I saw today.
A very wise man on Twitter called Kartikeya Datte, who's a cricketing view you may have seen on Twitter, always asked the question, would you rather your side were 180 for 8 or 180 for 2 at the end of their innings? And the implication is you'd always rather they're 180 for 8, because it means that they have actually not left anything in the tank. Now, it's not 100% perfect, is it? Because what might have happened is they got to 180 through clean hitting and a bit of luck, some drop catches, who knows? But I think essentially you're absolutely right. They used their resources and they kept on using their resources all the way down the order. I did think that 185 was not ungettable. I don't think that England quite batted as well as they might do. And I think it does always show, as I've said on other podcasts, how important a wicket Joss Buttler is, because he is the one player in the England team who can time the ball from the off on any surface. So getting him out just as he looked like he was getting going, I think is a really crucial factor for any side that plays against England. And they did get him today. And it's means that we've actually got a close series and a really exciting 5th game. And thank God.
We're fortunate today that we don't have to get back into the big Kohli debate.
Don't we?
But I do think we should mention that Adil Rashid got him out again for the 8th time. So I think that is official bunny territory.
It is funny, yeah. It's definitely bunny territory. I mean, it's absolutely staggering that man doesn't have an IPL contract. Adam Zampa has got an IPL contract, and Adil Rashid doesn't, which tells you everything you need to know. And it was brilliant bit of bowling, wasn't it? Fantastic. I wasn't quite expecting Kohli to come out of the blocks the way he did, though. I mean, he came charging at him, but I suppose that was the setup, wasn't it? The previous 3 or 4 balls that Rashid had bowled to him had got him tied down, and he felt the need to impose. And then to have the guts to just go a little bit slower and then drag the leg back the moment he saw his feet coming, bowl the perfect googly, the chuckle from Joss Buttler as he took the bails off was priceless. I think I want to use that as a kind of, text alert noise.
I know this is going to sort of sound a little bit ridiculous, and I'm hoping, Ross, you kind of back me up on this a little bit, but I thought it was good from Kohli to actually show that intent. I think sometimes he's a little bit guilty of taking the easy single because he's good enough to score a run a ball off those players, and a lot of people aren't. By risking, what I think I'm trying to say is that a Kohli that averaged 40 at a strike rate of 150 would be better than the Kohli we've got now. And if that's sort of what he's going for by trying to take on Rashid that way, good, isn't it, Ross?
Yeah, I think we got, was it 1 of 5 balls? And there's that bit, they can't afford to have 2 KL Rahuls in the side. So as much as people will sit there and wax
to have one, I would say.
What really frustrated me about it, and I don't mean to compare 2 because Kohli is a better player than KL Rahul, but the ball eater was on fine form again today. At least he made it into double digits this time, but he is a selfish bastard. And someone... Ishan should be in the side, right? He
was injured today, Ross. I don't know if you saw that. But
moving forward, there should be a bit where someone like that who is playing for themselves, and you saw it with the England setup of Dawid Malan, etc. They shouldn't be around that side. T20 is not a sport in its own right of cricket to be selfish. I don't think it needs to be all around the team, and KL Rahul doesn't fit that. And anyone who sits there and goes, oh, he was the orange cap holder in the IPL, I don't care. He scores at 130, can't go any longer, and his team didn't do very well. So I think when you compare that to what Kohli was trying to do, he's trying to practice what he preaches, and I think that's a positive thing.
Well, he did this time, didn't he? Because actually he hasn't on a couple of occasions in this series. He's looked to go gently, largely because he's seen his side was in trouble, having lost some wickets in the power play. And then he has chewed up balls. Now he's so good that he got himself and his team out of trouble by doing it. But you raised the Malan word there. And I think this is a source of it, very interesting debate. And because I have no settled view on this. When he's, I say, in form, when we've seen him rise to number 1 in the T20 rankings, it's been doing exactly the same thing. I remember an innings where the first 15 balls, he honestly looked like a blindfolded hostage who'd been chained to a radiator for the first 15 minutes he was out there. And then suddenly, like a switch flipped, and he was smashing it to all parts. Now, that might be the way that he plays. It's a dangerous one, though, isn't it? It's a big gamble, because if he comes off even doing that half the time, then it means the other half of the time he's chewed up 16, 17 balls for 11 or 12 runs, which could be calamitous. But to turn around and say, here's a guy who averages 50 in T20 internationals, is in his ranked number 1, and you're thinking, would we be better off, England, I should say, be better off with Joe Root? Would they be better off with Alex Hales and changing the batting order completely? Having, Hales and Roy at the top, bring Butler into 3, just go absolutely gangbusters all the way down. Would that be a better move? I don't know. I don't have a settled view. I don't know what you guys think about it.
Well, I think it's a great way to segue in to the second innings of the show to bring up the Milan debate as a contrast to looking at the 2 number 3s. Milan, let's face it, he's got a problem in this series. He's scoring at 5 runs and over in the power play, which if you're new to the sport is bad. It's
suboptimal, but you could argue, you see, that you don't need Milan to bat in the power play. You could try a pinch hitter in the power play, much like Narayan is used in the power play. So,
you could,
might Sam Curran come up the order if you lose a wicket in the power play?
We're not that desperate. We're not CSK.
Here's where in my mind, here's where I see the debate. It's either you keep Milan and you accept that in winning you every 3 T20s or in being brilliant every 3 T20s he plays in, he's going to cause problems in 2, but the rest of the lineup should be able to bail him out. Or you say, we're not going to accept that trade-off and we are going to go, as you say, full gangbusters. Daniel, Ross, where do you come down on that debate? Because Milan, I think, is the batter in that top 6 whose position is most questionable.
Yeah, I think after a couple of games, you can't. He's still scored. Well, his 20 off 20 has pretty much been his operating kind of stats here. I think you can't just say we're going to drop the player. I think there's a bit around Morgan's team that we've talked about with Jason Roy, right? Jason Roy was out of sorts for about 12 months. And even today, Jason Roy ate up a load of balls before doing a Milan and smashing it all over the place, regardless of how ugly it was. I think for the time being, Malan keeps his spot, but there is questions around how good he really is playing in Indian conditions against spinners, because he has walked past a couple and just hasn't looked entirely comfortable against it. In Australia, if the T20 World Cup was in Australia, he's one of the first names on the team sheet, I think, because of how good he is against that type of bowling. But he's left a little bit on the field, I think.
I think that's a very, very strong point. I think there is a little bit of horses for courses here, and I'm not sure that he quite has the game for muscling those spinners as he needs to. He's got to find. Today he got out playing the reverse sweep, so he was trying to find a different method, and it's a little bit troublesome when you see somebody trying a method that they're actually not the best at. When you think about Malan's best shots, they're off-pace bowling, they're beautifully timed, having got in, having unchained himself from the radiator. He suddenly smashes the ball through the covers. He can hit the ball beautifully over deep mid-wicket. He likes the ball coming onto the bat, and against spinners on, I say flatter, on harder decks, he can be destructive in much the same way, using a slog sweep. But he was bringing out the reverse sweep today, which suggested to me that he himself thinks he's got a problem. And it was a bit like, watching Ollie Pope in the Test matches. Very fast.
Don't take us back there.
Well, I will do because I think actually when you see a batter doing, you can tell when a batter's not in control of what it is that they're trying to do. And Ollie Pope is a terrific batsman who is going to score a lot of runs for England in, I think, possibly all formats actually over his career. But you could see that he wasn't comfortable with his game in the Test match by the shot selection that he had. And Malan is, to me, showing exactly those signs in India. The shot selection they weren't the sorts of shots you expect to see from Malan. So then the question comes, do you do like for like replacement? Do you replace him with Joe Root? Because actually, Joe Root isn't going to get 10 off his first 12. He's probably going to get about 15 off his first 12. It's not going to light the world up, but he is going to find those gaps. He is going to have a certain mastery. And against spin, he's definitely going to be able to keep it ticking over and allow the other guys to smash it at the other end. Again, though, I say I don't know the answer, because I think Roy still is out of sorts. And I think if England had Alex Hales in this series, it would have been a different matter.
I think I'll go first quickly, Ross, and then I'll throw over to you. I think to keep this podcast on brand, we have to kind of practice what we preach in terms of what we've been saying about Kohli. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to say that the way Malan is playing makes him quite a droppable player. I think he's playing badly. I don't think that you can afford to be 20 off 20 in T20 cricket. To double down on that, I think Malan's number one status in the world, I mean, I don't think anyone here is going to contend that that's a little bit of a mirage. He's been quite lucky that all of his best T20 performances have been in an England shirt. Like if you look at Malan domestically and internationally over the last couple of years, his domestic stats are way lower, and it's really hard just to be better because you're playing at a higher standard. That's not really how cricket works. There are some factors, like usually you play on better pitches, which might be a factor, as we've sort of said. But it's hard to predict. It would be hard, I think, for anyone to say that they really believe truly that Dawid Malan is going to be the player he's been for England for like the next 20 international T20s. Ross, what were you going to say?
So it was the point about Joe Root that Daniel brought up. So I think people always talk around that, but you've got Moeen Ali in that side, and Moeen Ali, if you talk about matchups, right, and the way in which kind of the data generation is kind of pushing T20 cricket in, and you start thinking around how that plays out, Dawid Malan in India probably doesn't have the best of matchups, but actually Moeen Ali in the side probably adds more value than Malan would do. Joe Root is a spectacular player, but within bio bubbles and all that kind of stuff, I just don't think Joe Root is the right option in this. Jonny Bairstow is a phenomenal white ball cricketer. You could move everybody up the order and slot Moeen Ali into that 7 bracket. Or if you wanted to, you realise that he could be a floater in that side because he's unbelievably good against spin, and he offers the off-spin option, which I think England are actually kind of lacking in their bowling lineup.
But Ross, it's another left-hander. And there was a point today when you really thought that the Indians could stifle England in that middle order because they could hide the ball wide of the left-handers off stump bowling over the wicket, full. It was devilishly difficult to get it away. And you were sort of screaming for a right hand, left hand to get it going. It was notable, wasn't it, that the one moment when England's innings really had momentum was in that Bairstow-Stokes partnership, where the bowlers were forced to keep shifting their length. And, Bairstow, I think, is a crucial part of England's planning. When he's in form and he's coming off at number 4, he causes massive headaches to the opposition with those left-handers like Morgan and Stokes floating around after it. But once he'd gone, then he had 3 left-handers. If there was another one in Moeen Ali, unless he's used up near the top of the order, which
I think that's what Ross is sort of. I think that's what Ross is sort of saying.
I mean, but open with him. I mean, is that?
If I were going to be, if I got to play T20 cricket god for England, You should do, Jack. That'd be something I would crowdfund for that. And would you sit on a cloud and grow a big beard? I would consider Stokes at number 3, as I think he offers a little bit more upside, to use the Dan Weston buzz phrase, in that power play. And obviously you can bowl, and it allows you to have that extra spinner in Moeen Ali, and it keeps Sam Curran in the side, and England can go full total cricket with that. There's all sorts of matchups you can go
7 bowlers, 7 left-handers.
That might actually be a really dumb idea. I've thought of it in the last 2 minutes. So who knows? Back to the game though, and we have just touched on it there. Stokes and Bairstow. Ross, can you emotionally take yourself back to their partnership? Because it did look like England were going to win the game when they were batting, didn't it?
I think there's just they know their roles, and there's that trust there. Jonny Bairstow is kind of England's saviour in all things cricket, according to Ed Smith and the selectors. It hasn't worked out in the Test matches, but I hope that the Indian fans have seen just how good of a player he actually is. Like, he didn't really get into a look into the Sunrisers Hyderabad side, because Sunrisers Hyderabad are one of the worst run franchises in cricket. But in terms of that England side, Daniel, I completely agree that the way in which his role is solidified in that side showed itself today. Stokes kind of just has that ability. It was probably his best performance in a T20 actually for England today.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think it might be his highest score.
Both with bat and ball, I'd say, in a way, because Morgan clearly had trust in him when he bowled. He bowled him three overs. It wasn't the split 2-2 with Sam Curran from before, and he did. Yeah, he looked terrific with the bat. He's obviously got that potential to do it. Staggeringly, still doesn't have a T20 international half century. And today, I think England were favourites at one point in that game. During that partnership, they were definitely favourites. It all fell apart when that partnership fell apart.
But I think what can't be taken away from this, and we obviously come at this from an England point of view, I actually thought that India did phenomenally well today. I thought they had enough runs on the board to defend, which is actually really, really important. I think a lot of times they leave themselves a little bit short and make it a little bit difficult for themselves. But the bowling unit today, I thought, bowled to a plan, and that's what sometimes we've seen it, sometimes we haven't seen it. But actually, even Thakur coming on, I was just like, this guy's going to go all around the place, and actually came on, executed his plan immediately, took 2 wickets in 2 balls, and completely shifted the game.
I don't know why you would think that though, because I think Thakur was superb in the second match. He bowled an absolutely brilliant death spell. I think he's in those conditions. He's very, very canny indeed. England have decided against taking pace off or bowling, mixing up. Jofra Archer does it a little bit, but for the most part, they've decided that they really like pace. So Mark Wood is told to bowl every ball at 90 miles per hour or more. Now, there's no surprise with what you're going to get, really, with Mark Wood. Whereas when Thakur comes on, he actually does read the situations really, really well, I think. But I do think that Pandya's improvement, or at least rejuvenation with the ball, is absolutely key. And it shouldn't come as a surprise, actually, because in the IPL 2 years ago, he was an absolute nightmare on occasion. He bowled he absolutely worked out. Oh God, what's his name? Dre Russ. I hate saying his name. Andre Russell. He absolutely worked out. What a brilliant spell to him when he was flying in one match. He's a really clever T20 bowler, and when he works, when Pandya gets it right, today he was impeccable. He was brilliant at the top of the order. When he came back, I thought they might have been able to get after him But no, he was good. You had the odd loose ball, but that's what's going to happen in T20. I don't think Thakur's going to be playing in their lineup because they're going to have Jasprit Bumrah, and when they have Bumrah, they're going to be fucking fearsome.
This is my bit.
They're going to be fearsome.
So this is my bit for Thakur. He's kind of like, if you ran a landscape gardening company, you'd hire him because he was the birdie bloke who'd pick up the bags. He's one of those. I don't think he's one of those people who you're going first name on the team sheet. He's there because he's not even the best bowler for CSK, and CSK were pants last year. I think when it comes to their lineup, you're right. This isn't even India's best team, and that's what's quite scary about it, because Bumrah coming back, Jadeja coming back, even Mohammad Shami is a better bowler than Thakur. But today, I thought they had a clear plan. We talked about Kohli a little bit earlier on, and I genuinely think the best thing that could have happened to India today was Kohli going off the field and Rohit Sharma taking the captaincy.
It was vital. It was absolutely vital. I mean, it was a key change, actually, and a stroke of tactical genius on the part of the India management. Is to whip them out the moment things are looking like really, really like when you really need a tactically brilliant captain on there who's also not going to throw his toys out the pram because the ball's gone for 4, hold up the game for 5 minutes to explain to his bowler that what I want you to do is not get hit for 4, while the bowler's going, yes, I'm not allowed to say, go away, you annoying bastard, because you're a god in India. So, yes, I mean, yeah, it would be, India would walk the T20 World Cup if Virat Kohli was just told to get on with batting.
You've changed your tune, Mr. Norcross. I'll tell you that. There was a bit a couple of months ago when you came on the show where you didn't want to put a foot wrong about Kohli, and I think now welcome to the dark side.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I don't want you to actually leave this in, or indeed,
it's too late.
It's too late.
I don't have that level of video editing skill. It's.
Rohit Sharma is clearly he's a very good captain in the mould of Owen Morgan, actually. He has sort of calm to him. It doesn't stop him slowing the game down to the point when I became skeletal and undernourished because it was going on so long. But no, he's obviously going to be a better tactical on-field captain than Virat Kohli. I mean, look at the Mumbai Indians.
Let's look at some examples of that, because we haven't just plucked these ideas out of thin air. Virat Kohli's bowling changes. He lined up Washington Sundar against who was the right hand?
Bairstow twice. He bowled him it was the last over of the power play. He got smashed in that, and then he came on for the 11th or 12th over.
Absolutely plundered to a right-hander both, and that's the most basic lineup in all of cricket, off spinners to left-handers. Like, even blokes who play like beer games 14 pints deep on a Tuesday evening down at Victoria Park with me and Ross smacks them all over the place to make himself feel good. Even those boys know you bring on the off spinner when the left-hander's batting. But then the next over, he bowled Chahar against Stokes, the left-hander. So the guy had to spin it in to the left-hander, and Stokes, he accepted the free runs. And that was the moment where England fans were like, oh, we've done this. Like, it must suck being a fan of an opposition team when you play this England side in white ball cricket. Like, we're just the best. And then Kohli disappeared, and suddenly, like, it was well bowled balls very wide of the off stump, 2 wickets. Thank you very much. Like, game over.
It was oddly noticeable, wasn't it? That. But, I can't explain. Well, I can explain it, but you'd have to go into a deep cultural appreciation of Indian history going back well over 300-400 years back to the Mughal Empire, and I don't think you've got time for that. Well, I certainly don't have time for that.
I don't think our YouTube comments can take that kind of discussion. So we're gonna move that on. I mean, it was a great performance from India. I think they proved a lot of people wrong, probably me, Ross, and Max included, in terms of their strategic flexibility. I didn't see that coming. I thought they'd stick to the tried and tested, get 165 and hope for the best. Ross, as you say, when they bring Bumrah back into that team, they could be really good. I still think that the way the Indian selectors go about selection is a bit weird, in that they kind of give everyone one match in and out the team. When in T20 cricket, all data will sort of suggest that you actually need a little bit of a run, because it's an extremely volatile situation to play cricket in. Like, each ball is incredibly magnified versus even 50 over cricket. The last thing I want to mention, and then we'll go on some questions. So, bear with us, was, Ross, we've talked about boundary percentage a lot on this podcast recently, haven't we? And that sounds like a really tedious thing. But I thought there were a couple of really interesting examples of how having a higher boundary percentage can win you games.
I'll be the judge of that.
And I want to use Suryakumar Yadav against KL Rahul for this example. So basically, Suryakumar Yadav over the last couple of years, his boundary percentage is about 3% higher than KL Rahul's, which sounds pretty negligible, wouldn't you say, fellas? 3% is not very many percent.
Dave Brailsford said the 1%ers are what got him all those gold medals, apparently.
You've kind of preempted where I'm going with this in a way. If you look over 120 balls, which is the length of a T20 innings, that 3% difference is approximately 4 extra boundaries, slightly less than, probably about 10 runs. And if you are looking for a marginal gain, that's an extra half a run and overs. I mean, it's not even really a marginal gain at that point, is it? What was the victory margin today?
8 runs.
Well, there we are. That's why we go on about things like boundary percentage, because when you put it all together, as India did today, it makes a big difference. It wins you cricket matches.
I think there's some of that. And Daniel, you are a world famous commentator.
Really? Okay.
Well, TMS goes worldwide, doesn't it?
I suppose so, yeah.
So there is a bit for me where the commentators, and some of them are good on Sky, some of them are less good. # Ian Ward. But there's a bit where they talk about something where whether it's boundary percentage, but there was a bit in the IPL where they always talked about Kohli being great at getting off strike with singles and rotating the strike for singles, and they were obsessed with that. And commentators almost created the narrative around it of being decided that is what was right to do. And so, as Jack rightly points out there, the boundaries are the things that is important. It's not about hitting, they've hit a 6 and then get a single. It's actually hit a 6, hit another 6, hit another 6.
Yes.
That is the optimal thing to do. And it's mad that people don't think in that way.
Well, Ross, no, you're totally right, and I entirely agree with you. But this theory's been around a little while. There's a terrific book which I'm sure you've read by Tim Wigmore and Freddie Wild called Cricket 2.0, which essentially explains why the West Indies are brilliant at T20, and it's for that very reason. Mm-hmm. The single is irrelevant, and again, referring to a cricketing view, Kartikeya Date, a very interesting analyst on cricket, he's of the opinion that in 20 years' time, T20 cricketers will all be 18 stone. They won't bother running, certainly not 2s. They might get the odd 1 for the hell of it. And the purpose of the game will be to hit the ball to the boundary every ball, and that will be it. It makes for a rather ascetic game, in my view, but I think he's absolutely right. Boundary hitting is way more important than knocking the ball around for 1s. I think there's still a value in 2s. The well-placed 2 into the onside while you wait for the ball that's absolutely rubbish, or the one that you can hit for 6 or hit for 4 is important. I don't think getting off strike and rotating strike is particularly useful in T20. It's totally different from Test cricket, where that is a massively important skill. I do think Ian Ward is a terrific commentator and a very, very good anchor. So I'm not going to let you get away with that. And I think Sky have got a magnificent roster of commentators. I don't know why I bother saying that, because I know they'll never pick me up because I never played for England. But
right, fellas, we'll move on to some Twitter questions. Then we've probably only got time for sort of 2 or 3. So starting off, Ross, you can maybe answer this. How does Bumrah get back into this side? Who do you drop after today?
Thakur.
Thakur?
Next
that is the correct answer.
Another question from Abe. Do you think Virat Kohli dropping to 4, allowing Kishan to open and Sky at 3 would be a good strategy? Dan, you had a different view on this earlier. Do you want to elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, it depends whether India are batting first or second. I don't think they necessarily have the flexibility to do that, but I would open the batting with Virat Kohli when they bat first, and I would bat him at 4 when they bat second.
One from Rashmi then. Do England need an anchor batsman like Virat Kohli in the middle order to stop the batting collapse? Ross, you're shaking your head. Why are you shaking your head?
1, batting collapses are funny. 2, 6, 6, 6, 6. That's all we want. There's no point England going out, but like, we batted all the overs and got 90. Sod it. Just get all out in the 12th over for 89.
I agree with Ross. I agree entirely with Ross. I think that the role of the anchor in T20 is fast disappearing, and within 4 or 5 years, we'll think it as mad that there were ever anchors in T20 cricket, as we think that people only used to get 230 and 50 over cricket and thought that's quite a competitive total.
Oh, you're like this. I got a text today from a friend who says he likes cricket. I played with him for a number of years, and he texted me saying Joe Denley should be in this side because a 30 from him was exactly what we needed. I think I deleted his number. I'm not talking to him again.
Yeah, he's dead to you, and he should be dead to mostly all of his cricketing friends, and he should live out the rest of his life in solitary isolation.
Last one, but before we get to that, I just want to quickly say that I think if T20 cricket did become just a boundary fest, they might tweak the rules a little bit, because there are things they can do in terms of most notably the ball they use. And
make it an oblate steroid?
I don't want to go like way off piste, but there's a situation in baseball where all teams are pursuing one of the true 3 outcomes, which are strikeouts, balls, and home runs. And that basically means the ball is actually hit to a fielder. So in other words, something happens about 30% less frequently than it did 20 years ago, which means baseball is not that interesting to watch. It's just generating the most optimal stats. And what the people who run baseball are now doing is looking at how they can reduce how far the ball goes, for instance, making the bases a little bit bigger to make it easier to not be run out, basically. Because people have stopped watching, I think
when do you think this is going to happen? Is this a 20-year project?
No, it's
happening.
Cricket.
I mean in cricket, yeah, because actually cricket is going the other way,
we're miles away from
flying.
It. Yeah. Well, that's true, but if 2 balls and over were going for 6, and there was no running between the wickets, no fielding, nothing close, no on-field action to enjoy as a spectator, it was just, he hits another one, he's bowled that ball, he's hit another one, he's swung and missed.
I've got one 3-letter acronym and one word for you: the DLF maximum. It's worth money every time that ball goes out into the crowd, because you get to advertise it. So if you honestly think that they're going to try to reduce the number of advertising possibilities, and that's the DLF single that's been clipped out to wide long on, I think you can think again.
I think in a 4.5 hour T20, they can find enough opportunities for advertising, and we had that today. They said that about home runs. The home run was king in the 90s in baseball, and now the home run is so boring that they're trying to get rid of the home run. So, let's see how things go. Last question, and I think this relates way back to the point that I've interrupted. Where is Alex Hales, Daniel?
I imagine he's in lockdown, possibly nipping out occasionally into his garden for a quiet beer and a contemplation. Where is he? I don't know. I would like to see him back in the England setup, because his numbers suggest that he's a terrifically good T20 player in the form of his life at the moment. But we say all that. He actually did have a pretty decent T20 World Cup in the Indian subcontinent, so he probably is pretty decent on Indian pitches, but hasn't had much in the way of IPL form, so it's not that easy to tell. I think it's very strange to think that this would be the best England squad without him, but I understand all the reasons why he's not there. So it's a conversation that's been had a million times before. If you took everything out of the equation, you'd say England's squad ought to have Alex Hales in it, especially because Jason Roy is a kind of feast or famine sort of player. When he's in form, he's absolutely magnificent. When he's not, he looks, as someone said today, like he's batting with a toothpick. And today, even though he got 40 runs, he did look a little bit like he was batting with a toothpick. So if you've got a slightly out of form Roy, and you've got an Alex Hales that you can just plonk straight in, then you'd do it.
Right. we're going to draw a line under the show at that point. Thank you very much for joining us, Daniel. Can you let people know where to find you and any other projects you're undertaking at the moment?
Yes, you can find me at Norcross Cricket, and the project I'm undertaking at the moment is cracking open another bottle of wine and sinking it at special speed, trying to stay indoors for another week before I, as an old man, get my first coronavirus jab. I encourage everybody to get one. It would be an awfully good idea, if for no other reason than that the government thinks it's a really good idea. So we're not going to get to go to the pub until you've all had the bloody jab. So just have the bloody jab. Those are my projects while I wait for the international cricket season to start in summer in England. So I'm available for Zoom bar mitzvahs, Zoom funerals, I suppose, and Zoom weddings until the beginning of June. And thereafter, I hope to have a bit of actual paid work watching cricket. I'm
going to have to change my will now. Just imagine that.
Am I in it now?
Yeah. You're just going to have a leading role at my funeral, and the grandmother has arrived, outliving her 27-year-old grandson. How sad.
Ross, you're 29.
Looking remarkably, looking remarkably, don't mind me saying so. Like Stuart Broad bowling into the wind at Old Trafford back in 2017.
Ross, can you let people know where to find the Cricket Podcast?
Yep, you should like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and follow us on all your podcast platforms you're listening to us on, and at the Cricket Pod on Instagram and Twitter. Leave your comments on YouTube, say what you like about it, argue with Daniel, argue with Jack. We love it.
4-1's gone, hasn't it?
I predicted 3-2 India at the start, and so I'm feeling well smug.
Right, thank you very much for listening or watching. We will be back on Saturday for the final T20.
Good luck, chaps. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Dan.